Huh. Just got to do that. I'm going to do the full sun. This will be much nicer. This will be much nicer when I have not a southwestern exposure. Hello, welcome everybody to the Roach Wiggle, September 14th, 2023. The first Roach Wiggle in a few weeks. And off the bat, the last 10 days have been some of the most difficult times I can remember over the last couple of years. Angela's dad's service was nice, and we had to spend some time with her family, and I did some stuff with that. And I'm trying to figure out what I want to do for the lighting here. Maybe I'll just turn this on. Close this until the sun goes down a bit more. So yeah, it's after all that, I had some tooth problems. I ended up having a root canal on Tuesday, and then some gastrointestinal things after that. It just did not deal well with the stress of the last couple of weeks. And Angel's been having a rough time too. But it's okay. I think it was either yesterday or today things started to go on the up and up, on the upswing. And I decided to take next week off of shipping to get on top of some stuff. And I think that's going to be good for my mental health and for the bug collection, etc. So I'm going to say welcome first and foremost to Jojo. Thank you for the super chat. I think that's what that is. I don't even know. I remember I enabled that option, but I don't know how I enabled it. I don't know how I can I acknowledge it? This is all I can do is report, remove, put user in timeout, a bunch of other stuff. I don't see how I can publicly acknowledge that, but I want to say first and foremost, thank you for the very first one ever, Jojo. Say hello to LC, to Tennyson. Good to see you. Alan's here, Zen Monkey's here, Exotic Wilderness. Got quite a few people here right away. Panther and Nico, hi again. Braden, hello. Welcome, everybody. So, also another big thing to announce for those who haven't seen it, which I think everybody's probably seen it, but the Bugapalooza is scheduled. The dates are up on the site. They're in the Discord. They're everywhere. Duchess Venom, hello. Jose Nunez, hello to you as well. I got so many people here. It's great. It's great to be back, guys. I'm glad that Angela and I had our time together last week with that, and now getting back into some sort of normalcy. But yeah, I'm just double checking if I put the right things in the Discord, which I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah, we got the pinned thing for the Bugapalooza, September 29th, 30th, and October 1st, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's going to be a Bugapalooza. I'm looking forward to and dreading it as always now. But should be a good time. Got lots of stuff. This will be the biggest one out of any of the ones that I've done. It's going to be so much work afterwards, but again, worth it. And yeah, so let's see. So we got Bugapalooza coming up, 3 days worth. JoJo's huge order just went out today. So many bits and pieces. Jojo, I really hope you get things unpacked in a reasonable time and all that stuff, and I hope that everything makes it in good shape. I think a lot of the stuff will, but yeah, that's about it. So we've had good results so far. We have Magnificent Animals here too. Hello. Anthony Green says howdy to you as well. Yeah, I'm trying to think of we've been doing so much stuff with things other than bugs the last couple of weeks, and I'm ready to just get back to bugs. I'm ready to just settle in. I got so much stuff I need to work on after the stream. I don't know if it'll be a short stream, Arachnid Crossing. I like that, Jojo. Beetles, says Panthera. Yes, a lot of beetles have come in too. I'm supposed to get a bunch of Dynasties Grantii from someone, and they shipped in. Then they told me that most of the ones that they caught died, so they only sent 2 pairs. Um, so that was unfortunate. But the females out of the pairs they sent me are like the smallest Dynasties I've ever seen. The one female is like an inch and a half or even less. It's so tiny. It's crazy how small they can mature at in the wild. And then I have like my captive ones that are just like gigantic compared to those. Maybe I'll bring one of those out later. Protetia jocelynii. They're doing well. I'm getting adults now of the speciosa subspecies, or is this Protetia speciosa jocelynii, or is it? I think it's speciosa jocelynii. So those are looking good. I don't think they're maturing as consistently as last year, but the adults seem to live a long time, at least 6 months. So even if there's a bit of a staggered maturation, they should be okay. And then I did get some cyanochlora. I found 1 pupa from those. Don't know if the rest are going to be pupating, but I was really excited for the cyanochlora. Got some blue dichronorhina this week, tiny larvae. They should grow pretty quickly, and hopefully I'll be able to make those available around February of next year. We'll see. We'll see a lot of beetles coming in specifically for the auction. So that's a lot of just so much stuff. It's going to be so much stuff. Alan asking about updates on Euphoria Monticola. We can check on them as a stream. This is their enclosure right here. Sort of a standard small seed-eating enclosure, and there's some tunnels. So I think I saw a couple of them. That up there. Saw a couple of them near the front last night. Sometimes these things are kind of shy about coming out during the daytime, as soil dwellers often are. Is that one? Maybe at the back. Let's check back here. I did have, I think I had mentioned to you, Alan, I had a couple of losses previously, and I haven't found any more losses since then. And there's a bunch of tunnels through here, and I've seen larvae, so I'm thinking they're probably all right. Humidity, everything seems pretty good in here. So, so there's the update on those. Trying to think if there's anything else that's really update worthy. Need to go through here and do husbandry. That's going to be top of the list for tomorrow, is doing husbandry here after get a couple more boxes out, because it needs it. It's gotten surprisingly dry from me running the fan and leaving the door open, or the window open, and just the breeze through the house has been drying out enclosures, which is good for some things, not so good for some other things when I'm still in the summertime care mindset. So I've got to really jump on things and make sure stuff's fed and watered properly. So, so yeah, that's how things have been going. Trying to think of any other specific projects proving out. Have been pretty excited about. I've talked about this a couple times before, but it's like at the front of my mind now. Pretty excited about how some of the HISR projects are going and the future potential for some of that stuff. Exact Wilderness says, "Hey Kyle, a female matured for me and my Gynolarita yellow, now just waiting for some young. Congrats. I think by the time I do husbandry, there might be some adult females, or there might just be sub-adults. But then I'll be pairing them up with the best of the best from the boys and seeing if I can get that going again. Again, there can only be one, and whatever, all my Gyna can be doing perfect except for one. And right now it was Sculpturata in a race to the bottom with the Larita Yellow for who is doing worse, and the Sculpturata have rebounded, so the yellows are now kind of Not satchel stuff, the other line of yellows that I got. Magnificent Animal says, my Lorita from the spring auction had babies. Congrats. Yeah, Lorita under crowded conditions are stupidly productive. And the problem with the yellows is I have been full of greed and avarice and selling or swapping the yellows before I had like the full colony back up and running. So pack nota from the spring auction to close. More good news from Magnificent Animals. Yeah, there should be 3 pack nota at the fall auction. The Skulka are doing very well. I really had to keep them dry through the summer, and not like dry. Like the deeper layers of substrate still have a good amount of moisture, but they really don't like as much, or they don't tolerate as much moisture as the 2 other pack nota, from what I have learned. Anthony Green, my Sculptra colony has become completely male. It's a big F in the chat right there for that. I'll put an F there. That is a fate worse than death in some contexts, is having an all-male colony. Actually, the apples I use for feeding the bugs, but I mean, they're human quality, so I eat them sometimes too. I don't think Gyna have a naturally male biased sex ratio. It's been pretty 50 from the litter from the female, or from the group that Satchel gave me. Maybe a little male bias, but not significantly, I don't think. You sold them to me, Kyle. It was your fault. Did you maybe have females mature somehow before them, or males will mature before the females? So maybe if you dug through the substrate, any of the remaining nymphs probably be females. Kind of how it goes with roaches when you acquire them and they're in a rough cohort. You get all these males popping up and like, where are the females? And then eventually it's the big event when you finally get an adult female showing up. 54 quart. That's quite a bit of space for a Gyna colony. You could really end up with like thousands in there in a relatively short amount of time. It's pretty crazy. That's a huge container. I don't even know if I have any 54 quart containers right now with roaches. Maybe one of my American roach colonies might still be hanging on in a big plastic, maybe close to that cordage container. But so, yeah, I'm just thinking like, man, what am I going to do next week? The world is my oyster. I'm going to go through and do all my husbandry that I haven't done. Isopods need it really bad. I did roaches last week before the suffering commenced, so I was very proud to squeak that by. I even got to do a little bit more than just regular husbandry. I went through and like refreshed substrate on some containers and stuff like that because I had a bunch of extra containers on hand. So I was just sort of like gearing up for being busy in October and part of November. But again, looking with lustful eyes towards doing husbandry in here. I'm trying to think anything particularly might be of interest for the stream. Man, you guys might want to see a Grand TI. I might sneak downstairs and grab the Grand TI. Asking about how easy is Pseudomonas septentrionalis. Perhaps you meant Pseudomops septentrionalis, maybe? Geosarma. That seems like a new name. I don't know if your thumbnail is new or not. Keeping Blabberous Cranford in a 64 quart enclosure, but they don't really need the headroom. Yeah, that's a lot of room. Yeah, I mean, you end up with a lot of roaches that way in the end. Pseudomonas. Yeah, I think you did mean Pseudomops. Pretty easy. If you get the Western strains, I've had some problems with Eastern strains culturing for some reason. But the Western stuff from like Oklahoma and Texas seems very easy. Orang Mango asking about me keeping any Chrysina. I have Gloriosa that I'm waiting to pupate. They're all pre-pupal, and they've been pre-pupal for a while now. And actually, Alan and I discussing whether or not Chrysina might need a cooling to induce pupation, or maybe they just take forever. Not really sure. But so I left the main group of larvae in the big tub, the big fish tank, I guess it's a fish tank. And then I took maybe like 7 or 8 of them and put them in a smaller container, and I just Hail Married it into the fridge. I just threw after I gave them like a day to burrow in and figure that out, and then I just threw it in the fridge. So maybe at the end of the month I'll take it out of the fridge and see what they do. If they all immediately pupate, then that's a pretty good sign that Chrysina should probably be, or at least Gloriosa. Maybe the other North American ones might need to be cooled. So Geosasarma type by having Aphylosia from the April auction in the Cranifer bin. So many isopods do phenomenal with roaches. I found that over time, sometimes the roaches will alter the soil chemistry to be not the best for the isopods, or maybe there's a bunch of compounding factors. But I had Orange Ember's Porcellio scaber in with Blabber's Cranny for I don't know 3-4 years, and just I don't know maybe 2-3 months ago, the container got just a little bit drier than it's been, and there's been a huge population boom of the roaches, like bigger than it's ever experienced in that container. And so I'm imagining all the roaches kind of like outcompeted the isopods for space and food. And so I'm pretty sure the Orange Embers colony completely crashed in there. I could be wrong. There could always be a handful that survived, and then conditions are better, and they'll just pop up again. It has happened before, but it looks like things are looking pretty dismal right now. But for a long time, they can do extremely well. And I mean, isopods won't last forever, and just their standard setups too. It's a good idea to refresh them every once in a while. Elsie says, for some reason, my glow spots have only a few males. Sometimes the males who are kind of on the bottom of the social hierarchy will get pushed out, or maybe they're the ones that are on the top and they're guarding things. Anyways, there's usually there will be males that will be hiding, and there will be some males that are kind of forced out or out of their own accord in glow spots. My harvestman ate all the Compsodies, and I'm sad. I need a separate Compsodies colony. I was just thinking, I had my Venoni Sei from Oklahoma City kind of crashed, and I tried cooling them, and then I tried bringing them back up to temperature, and I kind of did yet another Hail Mary, and I tossed them in trying to do another satellite colony of Nocticola to meet the demand. And so I just sort of threw them in there. I figured if it's a pair and they end up eating a bunch of Nocticola and breeding in there, I win. And I already have a Nocticola species Malaysia colony going separately. So if that, if this doesn't work out, it's a win-win, So I just figured I would try it. Merch, where is this for sale? Merch will probably be something rolled out with the new website, and probably near the end of the updating process. And still haven't heard back from that company that makes the hats. And I got them the high resolution pictures. I told them I would pay the startup costs and all that stuff. I'm wondering if maybe they thought I wasn't being serious, or maybe they decided it was a good idea. But I'll probably reach out to them and pester them again around then. Tennyson says normal for Gyne-Cappuccino to be male heavy. I've got 10 adults and they're all males. Again, they tend to mature quite a bit before the females do. So you'll see all the males hanging out doing the YMCA, and you won't see the females for a bit because they're still nymphs and they're still more buried. Yeah. So Geosarma, I've had a bunch of adult crayons since May. I still haven't seen any nymphs. If they matured in May, the first litter for most live-bearing roaches takes longer from maturity to the first litter than from the first litter to the second and to subsequent litters. So if they just matured in May, then you're still kind of in the safety realm for, maybe they're still maturing. If you start getting to October, November, and you're not seeing babies, there's probably something wrong. Yeah, Gio Cesaro, you bring that up in this next post about the first few broods took forever. But usually, if you have a good number of adults that won't take forever, they'll all just have their babies at the same time, with this huge population boom. Exotic Wilderness asking if the new website will have pure Klugii Dubrovnik. And yes, all the isopods, all the stuff I haven't put up on Roach Crossing, I'm going to do my best to get up on there with as much information as I can. I have some good news too. I sent somebody, I forgot that a couple of months ago, I sent somebody some wholesale groups of a bunch of isopods, and among those were some of the things I lost, such as the Vulgari Punta Cana, which I pretty much had lost hope of getting pure stock from any main vendor. And this person that I sent some to a couple months ago had them back on his stocking list. So I was like, hey, can I just buy some back from you? And he said, yeah. So I'm getting a restart of that. So I was very happy about that. And there's a couple of other things that are on there. It's kind of amazing how the isopod numbers I have they keep growing in the background. I really need to start doing regular isopod maintenance. It's really holding back how much I can produce. It's just so much to do. I could do it in a couple of hours with an assistant, but solo and take all the containers over to the bench, look through them all, grab the substrate, etc. I really need somebody to just move containers back and forth, and I haven't had that in a while. Tennyson asking about my isopod list updates. It's not going to go until after the auction. In November is when I will be putting all the effort into that stuff. It's basically going to be I had Youmacon at the end of October, early November is going to be my big break from everything, and then diving right into site updates and JoJo coming to take pictures and all this stuff, and then taking a week, probably a solid week or maybe 4 or 5 days off to just enjoy the availability of friends and family at that time, and then jump right back into doing things until the next batch of holidays. So it's going to be very busy. Next year's going to be very busy. Move next year. It's gonna happen. It's just the devil's in the details of the exactness of what's going to happen, because there's some pretty directly viable options on the table right now for move to property, and there's a bunch of discussion and some caveats with that, but it's looking very promising that things could go very smoothly and very quickly once some decisions are made. But I really wanted to get the website done while I was in a holding pattern, because there's no way I'm going to move this fall. And if it happens in the spring, it'll likely be after the spring auction. So I have the spring auction in April and work my butt off getting that whole thing going, and then jump right into, basically the last box is shipped after the April auction, work on moving everything. And it's going to be kind of hellacious, but maybe if one of these options is what happens, it may not be as bad as the last move. Orang Mango asked about any aquatic animals. I have some fish. They have not received very good care in the last 6 months, including some extinct in the wild live bearers. But I think I've learned some things from my efforts to keep them low effort. I do have Amicosplendens and Xenotoca doadrioi and a couple Aetinobrus toweri, I think. So I would like to, probably one of the first things that I do when I move is I will bulk out the live bearer collection. I have a friend Joe, whose pond we looked at, he brought me up to speed on these large metal wire enforcer, some sort of shipping bulkhead containers. You can usually get them for free from some places. They're trying to get rid of them. a lot of hydroponics people recommend them to use as your reservoir for your nooch solution when you're cycling stuff through. And they seem like they're the perfect size and just the right weight and non reactivity with most water to use for bulk growing some of these fish. So to fill some of the space when I move and get some funds generated for that, I will be going into that. Heterandria for Mosana or Formosa, I can't remember which one it is. Satchel was kind enough to send me some from Nollins, and I've had a group of those going, and what a incredible fish Heterandria is. Again, at the peak of 6 months of not taking very good care of my fish, and I looked at the Heterandria tank one day, which they share with some mud snails from Lake Erie, and there was maybe a quarter inch of water left, and I was just like, all right, you gotta do something about this. So I scurried and poured a bunch of water in it, and I just watched as I poured the water in, it's like all the fish like floated out, alive, obviously. This is a very vegetated setup, so things keep their oxygen levels and whatnot. But U.S. locality Armadillidium maculatum from New York. Somebody released that. I have a good idea who would have done that too. I'm gonna look this up on iNaturalist and feel disgust. People do shit like this. This is how USDA fish starts dropping the ban hammer, like the serious ban hammer on things. People being sloppy with stuff like this. See, it zoomed right into is maculatum restricted in range in the wild? It's pretty crazy how some of these look on iNat. I don't know if Tennyson, were you alluding to a particular thing? Get some elastum if you want lower for those things are basically just North America's Dario and they breed like crazy. Same thing happened. Bentley Angel de Cow had the same thing happen with Beta rubra. That's the thing with so many fish keeping. Like when I was growing up and I would read the fish keeping books, all the breeding success was stuff like I left for a vacation and the tank ran out of water and I dumped water in and they bred, or like I was getting lazy with water changes and then I didn't add my water purifier and all this stuff and I did ice cold water because my water heater broke and they bred like crazy. It's pretty crazy. So Tennyson, do you know about these establishments? Are these recent establishments now, or were those historical establishments? Aplocylus panchax. Let's see. That reminds me. I threw some sort of top minnow in my pond. I need to go and do like my year-end fishing out of the stuff that's in there. So I think the mud minnows are still going, but I gotta fish out the other things. Wow, some of these maculatum, quite pretty. These wild ones. Here's some with yellow spots. That's very interesting in the wild. But yeah, I'm curious, Tennyson, if don't know too much about it. Nathan mentioned a few months ago during a ISO Buddies live stream. I gotta be introduced. Some people would hear the USDA for saying, if you can find records of them being introduced in the wild in the US, we'll consider delisting or allowing you to send them with permits. So the first thing people start doing is wringing their hands and thinking about where they can throw a whole bunch of them. It's disgusting, but Panchax armatus, one of the horrible species complexes nobody wants to work with. Definitely introduced. I would not necessarily if they were introduced or if they were native or not. I was more curious if they were recently introduced there, indicating foul play. So, how many new roach species will be on the website after it updates? So, the blog post on August 31st, the Grand Roach List 2023 is a comprehensive list as of August 31st of all the roaches that I have. So if you check out that list, it's safe to assume that all the species with an X next to their name will be added to the website in the fall. And that's a lot of them. They don't all have that. Things with an O, there's a fair chance. It's not necessarily set in stone. And things with Z, I would say don't hold your breath. Really depends on some things. For example, since I made that roach list, if you look, you scroll down and look at, just for example, Salgania ragii, I have an O there for like establishing. And I was fearing that I was doing something wrong with their husbandry, which is super simple. So I was like, what could I be doing wrong? And TJ thought maybe I need to add more white rotwood and yada, yada. But then I checked on them last Wednesday when I was doing husbandry, and I found a bunch of nymphs. So ragii is probably going to be established in similar conditions as my Encaudelia and my Pinestia colonies, where eventually there will be tons of them in the enclosure. So maybe over total things being added to the website, probably well over 300 items, maybe even as close to 400, including merch and supplies and some other things that I wanted to add. It really depends on how much energy I end up having for this stuff. So Tennyson says, I'd assume so, as they don't seem to be very established but still present, which is a large issue. Actually, just talked to Russ this morning about making a video about proper containment. Tons of people are finding dairy cows and such in their gardens, and since they're labeled as Levis, a lot of people assume they're native locality dairy cows. I mean, this is what was going to happen. It's just how this goes with stuff like this. It's anything that gets commercialized like this, there will be people that will be releasing it accidentally or intentionally. We just have to hope that USDA is patient with this. But with the reveal that dairy cows are not actually Levis and are either an undescribed or unidentified species, and that is now confirmed. Nate did the dissections. We've done various crossing tests. We even have the wild type phenotype nearly isolated too. Now that that's confirmed, that means that dairy cows are illegal. So technically, for all you good little isopod people there, when you you're filling out your permits and calling your rubber duckies Cubaris murina, I guess you'll just keep calling Porcella levis. Just start calling Porcella levis dairy cow a levis. Only confirmed true Levis are U.S. derived ones like Cali Mix. So oranges, I talked with Nate about this. I was pretty forward with him saying that I'm pretty sure that the oranges, even if it's a European genotype, the orange Levis are Levis. They cross very readily with U.S. Levis lines. In fact, I've been working on creating an improved orange. I don't know how popular it will be or how improved it is, but I was crossing caramel with orange and picking for the best one. So I'm working on an improved orange, as well as Derek Niehouse's Colby Jacks, which are how now crossed with orange, and then again improved. So basically, that's kind of what I was doing with the caramels, but this is with that how now strain gene, the Harlequin or Dalmatian gene that's present in that. So yes, LC roaches can have eggplant. I've used it pretty reliably in the past for feeding them. I like to use it for larger colonies. It's one of the vegetables that if it's left to rot, if the roaches don't eat it, forward flies will breed on it pretty readily if it's too moist. So I try to give it to larger colonies because they'll just destroy it before anything like that can happen. So yeah, I sent quite a few things to Nate a couple of weeks ago for his collection and his purposes, finding out that some Trichorhina from Puerto Rico are undescribed. So that was interesting. Picopods are probably undescribed too. A lot of undescribed things. And the hobby will always, this isopods are kind of like the fish hobby in a sense now that the hobby will always be ahead of the publications as people are quick to grab things and sell them and not so quick to figure them out or figure out what they are. So, Floridosia. Let's see a Floridosia again. Floridosia fusca. Well, come on now. I want to look at it. The Rufus woodlouse. Oh, that's pretty good. I wonder where that's found. Oh, Joseph Sarma, that's your record. Send me some Floridosia at some point. I want to work with those. I got a bunch of. Also, right around when I shipped to Nate was when I got a bunch of cool, to me, tiny isopods in. So I Trichorhina donaldsoni. I went out and collected Platyarthris hoffmannsegii from my neighbor's yard. They're in my yard, but they're easier to find in his yard. Those are doing well. Let's see what else. Trichoniscus and Hyloniscus. I mixed the two of them in one colony. They're found in the same place in the wild, so I'm just sort of throwing stuff at the dartboard and seeing what sticks with that. Joseph Sarma says I just kind of collected them on accident while grabbing Talatrodes and Venezillo, and they've been existing in my Hemiblab bin. Yeah, I gotta get some of those. Actually, I need to get some Talatroides from you too, Joseph Sarma. Need to get those as well. So, here's some fun news. So, Will has been sort of the gateway to the pseudoscorpion hobby for a lot of people with some of the interviews he did last year and whatnot. And I know he kind of got the ball rolling, and he's been very busy. Has not really been updating Will's bug room. That will probably change because we're going to go on the Florida trip in the spring/winter. But I found out that in my tiger hisser enclosure, which I started up 3 or 4 years ago during the Roach Crossing Renaissance. I think that's a fun way to refer to like 2020 is the Roach Crossing Renaissance, or maybe 2019, 2020, whatever. And I didn't have my leaf sterilization protocol down pat. I brought in some stuff from outside and threw that in with them, and that's where my Neonemobius ground crickets came from. And then for years, the container just sort of existed. And then I went to pack some up for an order a couple of months ago, and I was banging the bark, and I noticed a bunch of little pseudoscorpions fell out of it. And I contacted Will about it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you come over, we can find some more." Will's been busy, so we haven't had a chance to do that. And I've had other stuff for him to do when he's come over here. But anyway, so then I was looking at the tiger hisser enclosure and thinking, I kind of need to do a refresh of this. I want to put this up now. Oh yeah, beautiful sunset. That's nice. That's nice, beautiful red, blue, and yellow sunset out there. It's a good nice eye candy. Nice September sky. Anyways. So I decided, okay, I'm going to refresh the whole tiger hisser enclosure, move them all to a new enclosure and, just a restart that I felt was necessary. But then I was like, well, I need to get some of those pseudoscorpions and move them with the tiger hissers too, because I want those to keep culturing. Whatever I was doing was working, so I'm not going to, question it. So then I started poking around. I was like, oh, maybe they're up in the bark. And I found a couple of them on the bark like I did before. And I started looking in the substrate, and I ended up finding maybe one pseudoscorpion per square 3/4 of an inch. There are very high densities in the substrate in that enclosure. And so I've decided that I'm actually going to just kind of set that enclosure up again on its own to the side and just sort of let them keep culturing in there. I'll leave a couple tiger hissers in there in case their poop's factoring in down to the springtail biodiversity or something. But yeah, so we are on fast track to have another regularly commercially available pseudoscorpion in these guys. And let me look up what taxon they belong to. So Dinochirus is kind of a hard act to follow because they're huge and they're easy and they're very long-lived. These are smaller. I don't know how culturing them separately is going to go, but they're prolific enough and they seem to live at very high population densities. All right, didn't save the things from Will. Let me Snapchat him. What taxon was the pseudo boys that I found in the Roach bin again? I want to say it was a trinetid. They're very small. So Orang Mango says, how moist do you keep your tiger hissers? I've been keeping mine very dry. Mine are kept pretty dry too, but the substrate's always moist. A lot of hissers some of the trickier hissers seem to like very high air humidity, or they only start breeding or producing lots of babies reliably when there's high air humidity, but they hate stagnant air, most of them. Portentosa, or at least whatever the stock that we have, whether it's a cross between stock that was brought in the 70s or 80s, or if it is its own pure locality. The hobby Portentosa seem to be the exception to the rule, which is probably why they lasted for so long. In that they just kind of take any conditions. They take dryness, they take moisture, they take heat, they take cold. But last time I talked to TJ about his Portentosa Masolas, I think he was having problems getting more litters out of them this summer. He made it kind of sound, TJ, if you're here, if you listen to this, feel free to correct me, but it made it sound like his weren't doing very well overall. Meanwhile, I took two from TJ, two females that he sent me in a mixed group. I said he sent me one or two pairs originally, maybe one pair, and I asked him for more so I could keep genetic diversity for selecting color forms and what have you into the future. So he sent me another group of nymphs, and I ended up putting two of those virgin females with one male from my group, which is all from one pair. And that 1.2 group, which is in the bug room downstairs, still has not produced any nymphs. They refuse to reproduce. And they're in the same setup as the ones up here, which are, I think the females may have ooths as large as 100 babies, because there's probably 1,000 hissing cockroaches in there now from these Masola. Same setup. The difference is population density. And again, the females came from TJ. So if there's anything, I don't know, systemic that was going on in his colonies, it could have transferred over here. But they're fat. So I'm expecting babies any day now. Still no updates on Andromana. Actually, these look a little bit moist, but these are from the hobby strain of Princessia these are females, immature females that I brought up to put with the Andromana male, so that in the worst case scenario, if I can't get babies from the Andromanas, at least I can get those genetics into our current Princessia lines, and then just kind of passively breed back for the Andromana phenotype, and then forever label the strain as something else. I don't know what I would call it. I have to be very careful because I don't want to sully the name of the Andromanas, because one day it may become a pure Andromana strain versus the intergrade or cross strain or whatever. It would be very important to keep the two of them distinct. So, but yeah, many gears turning here. Again, I have a lot to do when I go downstairs. I want to also say very quickly to Stephen Logan sent me some termites that I was missing, some Zootermopsis. I was able to get a couple from him. He may send more. There was kind of some high mortalities in transit, but I'm pretty confident I can get them going off of what I was sent. And Jack Green also sent a restart of Grylus assimilis to me. So thank you both if you're there and you're listening. And I think, again, pretty high mortality on those in transit too, but seems like enough to get a colony going. Really just need a pair to make it to adulthood, and I'm kind of babying them. I had my Williamsburg Grylus had like a really, really heavy crash, and they were not looking good, and I pulled as many nymphs. They had a huge grain mite outbreak, and I didn't get pests. I didn't get predatory mites in time, and they had turned hypopus stage, so they were like plastered all over the faces of the nymphs. And so I threw them in the smaller setup where they're getting more heat. They're drying out between waterings, which is good at controlling grain mites. It's fine for growing crickets. It's just not good for breeding them to do that. I threw some predatory mites in there, and they really rebounded, and I don't think they're at risk of me losing them anymore. So, but I did that with the Similis. I'm just going to power grow them until they're adults and then move them into the breeding setup. And then they'll have a huge explosion, and then it'll be a problem for Kyle probably in October to manage, if not maybe a little bit sooner. Elsie, if it's not too much trouble for you, could we see an adult Roth's burrowing roach? Don't feel like you need to. I'll do that. Because I did say, I think last time you asked about that, and I said I would get one. So, I'll go and grab an adult Bursatria rothi. I'll also grab Dynasty's Grantii. I've been meaning to show off how small the female that I got is compared to my captive bred female. So yeah, I'll go do that shortly. Let's just see what Tennyson has to say here about his Portentosa. Mine had one litter, but some seemed to have disappeared for some reason. I think I just need to rehouse them, though. I'll be trying to do that this next paycheck and get them a nice large bin because my genes are crazy, apparently. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with the amount that I have. I'm probably gonna put a good number of them up for auction. But I really wanted to keep that diversity, and even the pair that TJ sent me, there's a good diversity of phenotypes in their offspring, but this is the chance for me to get that stuff fixed in the population, to have that variation, because once it's gone, it's very difficult to get back. And again, I'm not worried about husbandry or they're going to be more inbred and less healthier, whatever those arguments that I do not believe in, that do not have a scientific nor anecdotal basis to them, at least at the bare minimum with respect to breeding insects, at least absolute minimum with respect to captive breeding cockroaches. It's more, I wanted to just preserve that genetic diversity, because who knows, maybe in the year 2080 they'll be doing cockroach reintroductions in Madagascar, or like what happened with the tiger hissers. I'm kicking myself for never isolating the individuals, the old strain that I had, like before I gave it to Dan, and then Dan gave them back to me. Some of the individuals in that old strain would have the red borders on the pronotum, especially the females, and I haven't seen that pop up since I got the strain back from Dan, and I missed that, and something I really wanted to breed for, and now it would be very difficult for me to find pure stock and be able to breed that again. So that's what I'm trying to mitigate with keeping diversity in the Masolas, so I don't have a situation like that happen when I want a phenotype or a project. So, yeah, I'll go show off some Grantii. I'll go get a Bursatria rothi, and then we'll look into wrapping up the stream. So I'll be right back, everybody. Although I should say, somebody brought up that I should be using super chats for show bug. So I'll keep that in mind into the future, because I need the money to buy bugs, basically. It's the bottom line. So, all right, I'll be right back. All right, for our suite of show bug this evening, we have the much requested Bersatria rothi. This is the biggest female that I could grab, but she's also quite old and her antennae are kind of falling off and she's missing some tarsi. But she's a pretty good sport. We're going to see how effectively we can show her off. The missing tarsi, probably the biggest factor in showing her off accurately, since she can't hold on quite as well. Probably about a year and a half old, but pretty good size. Not the biggest that I've produced. So, yeah, Bersatria, very, very underappreciated genus of very large cockroaches. Excellent for handling, just easy to keep all around. Just kind of a good mainstay cockroach that has really fallen in popularity. I used to see the Fumigata variety pallida, as we now, again, that's kind of a weird nomenclature for it, but it's the most accurate we've got, I guess. But used to see them at reptile shows, like just regular, they'd be right there in the like feeder selection alongside like orange heads. Dubias weren't really even that popular at that point, so dubias would be there sparingly, but orange heads, discoids, you'd see lobsters, and you'd see lateralis. LC, there should be some rothi at the auction. But yeah, you'd see Bersatria amongst the feeders. In fact, when I put them on Roach Crossing, I put Fumigata pallida as a feeder taxon species, and that might change because as I understand it, they're not very common anymore anywhere. They've just sort of fallen out of fashion for some reason. So all of the Bersatria should be available at the auction. Do not quote me on that, but all of them should be. All the colonies are doing pretty well, so they all should be at the auction. So, so there you go. Nice Bersatria rothi female. Again, has always been a genus I recommend to people for handling. Always the top of the list of, hold her close to me, she see her a little bit better. Top of the list, people, I'm looking for good roaches for handling. What do you recommend? Archimandrita, some Blabberus, Bersatria, Hemiblabra, kind of hit or miss, usually pretty good. I do recommend Uricotis too, especially the larger species, Lixa, Floridana, Opaca when I was still producing them, but that might change soon. And Bersatria, again, Bersatria was always on that list because they're very docile, they're very large. Look at this thing. So, so we'll be very thankful to her for spending some time with us. And now it's time to show everybody the Dynasties Grantii. He tells you not to you versus the Dynasties Grantii. He tells you not to worry about. This is going to be ridiculous. Floridana are always very pleasant when I find them in situ. A lot of those toxic things usually are quite pleasant because they know that the things that they are adapted to deter the things that want to mess around with them. So they're usually pretty chill. Tennyson has found more of his Gronfodorina portentosa hiding in the holes. Yeah, first couple instars really love to do that. Pretty much all Gronfodorini. So, yeah, I mean, eventually they'll get too large for that, and you'll just start seeing more and more adults out and about. But we're getting ready for the, again, Dynasties Grantii, you versus the girl she tells you not to worry about. Got to find my captive bred female here. Is that her? No. So the male, I'm really getting a little worried for this female. The male that I have to pair her with just matured, and he hasn't really become surface active yet. I did an eastern practice of ripping the beetle out of its pupil cell before I think it was really ready for that. So I'm just hoping that he becomes surface active sooner than later because she's getting kind of old, but I don't know. They might live a lot longer if they haven't been mated. The egg producing process probably starts to shorten the longevity pretty abruptly. But until then, you probably got some time if you got a virgin beetle female. So it's going to tidy things up here as I drop the whole container on the floor and the wood spills out. Yep. Happy Thursday, everybody. That's okay. We clean that up later. We're here to have fun. It's the Roach Wiggle. We gotta have fun. Anyways, let's do a little catch up here before the reveal. How is it possible that you have a roach tattoo somewhere on your body? I have 0 tattoos, actually. Where is the Roth's burrowing roach native to? They're from Cuba, as are all members of the genus Bursatria. So here we have my captive bred Dynasty's Grantii female. She's 2 years old. She's from a female that Will and I caught around this time of year in Arizona in Cave Creek Canyon. It was like the best thing from that leg of the trip was coming back at night and seeing a huge Grantii on the sheet at an area where they were supposed to kind of be out of season. So this is the captive bred one. I put a lot of time and effort into raising this. It's actually my first species of rhinoceros beetle that I got to maturity. And here we'll see a wild caught one from Payson and just do a quick size comparison of these two. Captive bred, wild caught. This is the smallest rhinoceros beetle I have. Well, I guess I've seen some of those weird things that are actually in the Dynastiny. I can't remember the genus, the rice beetles or whatever. But like in my brain, those don't really count as rhinoceros beetles. I'm thinking more like dynasties and whatnot. So yeah, here's night and day between my captive bred female and come on, focus. Getting there. Kind of focused? Yeah, it's kind of focused. Good. So her mom didn't feed her. Holy moly, I love all these reactions. So yeah, diet and whatnot can make a pretty big difference in adult size and genetics too, but this is almost certainly diet. Like the males from the same locality are quite large. And so I ended up with 2 of these females. They're obviously I will take good care of them, but their primary objective for me is just to get eggs out of them. I really like Grantii. I find it funny that I had success with Grantii, at least getting to adulthood before I did with Titius, and hopefully I will be able to pair this fresh male with this female without him impaling her. A lot of people were suggesting I do hand pairing, and it's very annoying, very time consuming for me. But I may end up doing that, and/or I made a big beetle pairing enclosure. I was using it for other stuff before, but now it's just it's the perfect size for this big like jousting log that I put on it, and it's got a screen lid and an accessible side. So it's just like, yeah, this kind of looks like it would be a good enclosure for this. So I may be putting pairs in there overnight and just or checking semi-frequently for mating, and then once I see it happen, pull the female. But I would love to close the loop on Grantii. It was very easy, just time-consuming. Year and a half for the first set of adults, and now for this next flush of adults, it's more like 2 years. But it's another notch in the belt, and I would love to have 2 localities. Yeah, see if there's any differences between them, because these populations have to have been separate for a good amount of time, because they do not like desert habitat. They're found in the more temperate mountains, cooler mountain areas, Payson, Cave Creek Canyon, even up into Utah, I'm pretty sure. Easy but time consuming. Yeah, it's kind of 50-50 because you could end up with a mismoult of like the one male you were waiting for your females that have been alive for a year from something, and then it like dies in the pupal cell, or the wings are all messed up. It's very, very high time commitment, mid reward sometimes for some of these larger things, and kind of high risk for some stuff too. in my experience. One day I will do a good I'll do a good article on sort of the beetle hobby as I've learned it in the last 2 years compared to my experience with roaches. Spoiler alert, I will be siding more with the roaches in terms of a lot of things. Um, I think the main appeal with the beetles is how big and gnarly a lot of the adults are. And with roaches, it's like hissers. Most hisser species get as long as or larger than quite a few beetle species. They grow faster. They are less specialized in what you need to feed them. They reproduce faster and they live longer than these grantii. This female up here will probably be lucky if she gets another 2-3 months. This female, if she lays like 15 eggs and kicks the bucket in 2 weeks, I'll be happy because that seems pretty good. Um, but uh, but yeah, so you take 2 years, you get this cool beetle, you kind of get to experience it for a bit, and then it kicks the bucket kind of unceremoniously and leaves you with a bunch of larvae to take care of, which need entirely different conditions than the adult. So it's kind of, is it a metaphor for life? I don't know, something. But with roaches, it's like, yeah, get the colony going. Yeah, oh yeah, there's my favorite hisser right on top of the log where he'll defend his territory for the next 2 years, God willing, etc. Uh, have white form grantii ever been specifically targeted and isolated? Um, I don't know. I think I was told by Kai that and Alan that some of those like quote unquote white forms of dynasties are the Central American species crossed with Grantii for the coloration. So they're like F1 hybrids. Um, but of course, people can have whatever they want and label it whatever they want. So when you see a picture of something, that I specifically had this conversation. Alan, was it Hercules? It was with the Hercules that I had brought up that there were a lot of cool pictures of gray ones, and you said, "Oh, that's just damage to the elytra from UV or something like that," right? That was the case with like the white forms of like the Hercules, right? Because their natural color is more like Tidius, I think, like across many of the subspecies. So it's like they take a picture of a perfectly mounted specimen that's been dead for a long time and has experienced discoloration past like, yeah, bluish gray from UV damage. So when you're seeing pictures of some of those like really cool looking dynasties, it's not actually, a morph or something people have isolated. It's like a specimen that's really livingly or lifelike posed, and it's just kind of old. Uh, yeah, the fact that there's, with beetles, it's big chunks of care for like larvae. Change through all the substrate, and I mean that's it. But you got to take the larva out. You got to get rid of the old substrate. If you don't have a system for doing that, then you gotta dispose of it, and may not be able to use it for something else. And it's a whole thing. It's kind of more stressful for me because like when I do like a week's, when I do like a month's worth of roach husbandry, it's like every month it's pretty much, oh yeah, I'm going to do the same thing as I did last month. And maybe, once a year I'll do this huge overhaul, but it's still the same thing that I did before day in, day out. With beetles and stuff, it's like, okay, we got egg laying setup. Okay, there's eggs hatching. Now I got to take the eggs out of the setup. And okay, well, now they're feeding and I got to put them in a new container. Okay, and then they've eaten through all the substrate and I have to go through and refresh all the substrate and check them all. And this one's finished all the substrate, and this one didn't. So I'll leave this one, but I'll have to work on it again because the substrate's not completely eaten, but it's not enough to throw out. And then one day it's like, oh, they're turning yellow. It's time to like move them to a pupating setup or make sure they can. It's a whole bunch of. It's just more brain think. I don't like a lot of brain think with stuff like that. Or a lot of moving parts. I mean, I have the beetle rack, which has made things a lot easier. I guess technically 2 beetle racks now, but still a lot of moving parts that I don't particularly care for. At least with like Dynasties and Dorcas and the Phallocrognathus and whatnot. The seedlings I will not speak badly of. Seedlings are more on the Roach schedule of maintenance, which is why I love them so much, especially Pachnota. Pachnota are one of the bug husbandry's God's gift to mortals, certainly in the form of something that's easy, fecund, has a multi-generational life cycle and over the course of a year. There's a lot of pros to things like Pachnota that are very appealing to me. But I do like the fact that this is like a little memory here that 2 years ago I was blacklighting in Cave Creek Canyon and this thing was there, and Will and I had a good time. So it's kind of nice to think about it that way, but also kind of a pain now biting my nails, hoping the male becomes sexually active before this female decides to kick the bucket. But she's in good shape. She's in very good shape. She did have with these setups with this substrate that I've been making. I've been trying different mixes and whatnot. Elsie, good to see you. Have a good evening. Have a good week. Um, I've been making substrate mixes with my compost and working on what works best for what beetles and all that stuff. And um, I did have, I think it was from the jelly and the high humidity in her enclosure, because a lot of beetle adults are very susceptible to drying out, especially compared to like my experience with roaches. But anyways, so there were grain mites and they did go to hypopus stage, and there were a couple of them on her. And so I introduced the predatory mites. And I wasn't sure if they would go after the hypopus on the beetle. They didn't really do that on the crickets. I think it was sheerly the husbandry changes that got the hypopus grain mites off of the field crickets that I had. But then, when I checked on her, or actually, I think it was when I checked on her, they were all gone. And then I have a Dynastis tidius enclosure that was having an issue like that. Dumped the grain mites in, and then I went in there. And I did see the predatory mites crawling on the beetle, actively going after the grain mite hypopus that was there. So that was very good to see. Made me happy to have predatory mites on hand, because it's the quickest, easiest solution to grain mites that I've found. They just work so quickly and so effectively and make my life so much easier. Same with the fungus gnat rope beetles. That's another one. Now, to complete this holy trifecta of getting rid of nuisance organisms, so I have grain mites dealt with, I have fungus gnats dealt with. The last one, and I will consider this my greatest life accomplishment, is if I can find a biocontrol that is highly effective on those damn forward flies. If I can find something that goes after only megacelia and make it commercial, I think that will be my greatest life accomplishment. Full stop, out of anything that I've ever done. So I want to work on that, finding something, because that would help a lot of people in a lot of ways. Yeah, Panthera, that crust, when they form that life, that's a specialized phase called hypopus, and they're very resistant to drying out and starvation and a bunch of other things in that phase. So basically, when you end up with a hypopus situation, sometimes you need a multi-pronged approach. So like with the Grylus, I had to change the setup, change the diet, change the moisture schedule, and that's what took care of them. But with things like beetles, it seems because the beetles are not readily moving and they have similar humidity preferences to the predatory mites, that's a good way of managing the hypopus stage grain mites with beetles is using predatory mites. So again, guys, here you go. A big and a small Dynastis Grantii. I just can't believe this thing is like an inch and a half long. It's so tiny, especially compared to this monster of a female here. It's crazy. And actually, one of my Grantii larvae, I'm hoping it's a male, but it was huge, absolutely huge for even a Grantii. Like some of these adults I've been getting out of them, I've heard some compliments from Kai and from Kim, and Kim has a very extensive collection of dead stock of Grantii. And I showed the male to him. And he said, "Oh yeah, that's a good, that's a good size Grantii. Not like a oh, that's average, not on the small side. Yeah, that's pretty good size, So if that one larva matures into an adult male, it's going to be monstrous, and I really hope that that goes swimmingly for it, because that would be so cool to have. I don't know whether to continue those genetics if I have a female to pair specifically with him, if it is genetic, or if it's just happenstance. Still nice to have the specimen and the memory and the talking point. So, okay, everybody, we're past the hour mark, so I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the stream here. Thank you all for joining me for another very pleasant Thursday evening, another Roach Wiggle. We have one more live stream left until the auction. We will not have a live stream on the 28th. There will not be a Roach Wiggle on the 28th because that's the day before the auction starts. So next week will be the last Roach Wiggle. And then we'll be in live stream mode for 30 hours over the course of the last weekend in September into October. Sorry, Horned One. Don't worry. If you're hard pressed for Roach Crossing content, there's a bunch more coming because the live stream or the auctions are coming up in 2 weeks. So smaller beetles taste more savory, says Zen Monkey. I don't know if I'm going to try that with these guys. This is an awfully long-awaited snack. I don't think I can wait 2 years for my snack to come to fruition. But anyways, again, thank you all for joining. I'll see you all next week. And get ready for the auction, everybody. It's going to be something. So until then, may your cultures ever be bountiful. Good night, everybody.